Hi learners, my name is Mr. Carrington and I'm so glad you are here because I desperately need a text detective. Are you up for the challenge? Awesome. I have my detective gear here and I need you to grab yours. You will need a writing utensil like a pencil or marker and a sheet of blank paper. Go ahead and grab those items and I'll see you back here in about 20 seconds. Welcome back, text detectives. I've got my detective gear, and I hope you have yours. So, let's get started on today's case. My boss said that today's case is going to be a piece of cake. She knows you'll solve it with no problem. Yum! I love cake. Wait, what? We're not actually talking about a piece of cake. Oh, right. When my boss said today's case is going to be a piece of cake, she didn't literally mean we were going to eat cake. She meant today's case would be easy. Text detectives, my boss just gave us an example of non-literal language. And guess what? That's the focus of today's case. Today, I need your help determining the meaning of some non-literal phrases in this interesting historical fiction text titled Dear Mr. Rosenwald, The School That Hope Built, written by Carol Boston Weatherford. It's a collection of short poems that come together to tell us a story. The title of each poem is at the top of each page. There are lots of examples of non-literal language in this book, and my boss told me that I needed to determine the meaning of two non-literal words and or phrases within this text. That's why I knew I had to call you in. What do you think? Can you help me crack this case? Great! I knew I could count on you. We don't have much time, so let's jump right in. Here, I have my detective case that contains all of our clues. Here's what I have so far. Clue 1. This is our anchor chart that explains the difference between literal and non-literal language. Let's take a look at it. Literal language are words and phrases that are used according to their actual definition. So, what this text says is exactly what the text means. Let's look at the example on our anchor chart. Can you read it aloud for me? In this sentence, a piece of cake literally means that I ate an actual piece of cake before my test. Now, let's look at non-literal language. Non-literal language are words and phrases that are intended to be figurative and go beyond their literal meaning. In other words, the text doesn't mean exactly what it says. There's a deeper meaning. Many times, authors use non-literal language to create an image in the reader's mind. Non-literal language makes reading more interesting. Can you read the example of non-literal language out loud for me? So, in this example, what does piece of cake mean? Yes, that the test was easy. You're right. It's the same as when my boss said that solving today's case would be a piece of cake. But wait, how did you know that piece of cake meant easy? Oh, I see. You were able to use the sentence after the non-literal language to determine the meaning of piece of cake meant easy. What does the second sentence say? Read it out loud for me. Okay, so since the student made 100% on their test, that gave us a clue that it must have been easy for the student. We can use context clues in the text to help us infer the meaning of non-literal language when we aren't sure. Good work. All right, now that we know the difference between literal and non-literal language, we are ready for clue 2, our text. Here are the two phrases we will be looking at for today's case. We will come back to them in just a minute. Finally, we have clue 3, our graphic organizer. Since I know you already have your detective gear, Go ahead and grab your paper so that you can complete this graphic organizer with me. We are going to fold our paper in half hot dog style so we can create 2 columns, just like this. Okay, let's label our graphic organizer. Complete your graphic organizer along with me. Since we are going to determine the meaning of non-literal language, we will write non-literal language at the top of our left-hand column. In our right-hand column, we will write meaning. This is where we will write the meaning of the non-literal language. My boss has identified 2 examples of non-literal language in the text. So we will also need to number our paper 1 to 2. Go ahead and number your paper just like I did. Alright, now that we have reviewed the clues in our case so far, let's get started. I'm going to model for you what we will do with our first example from the text. Before we look at our first example of non-literal language, I want to remind you about what this book is about, since we won't be reading this entire thing today. This book tells the story of a community that comes together to build a new school. These schools were known as Rosenwald schools because they were funded, in part, by Mr. Julius Rosenwald, the president of a popular store at the time called Sears, Roebuck and Company. Mr. Rosenwald worked with Mr. Booker T. Washington, a former author and former slave, who wanted to create better education opportunities for black students. These two worked together with rural communities to build these schools all over the South so that black students could get a better education. Okay, now we are ready to look at our first example of non-literal language. We'll look back at the first example in Clue 2. Listen as I read the example aloud. Years ago, Booker T. Washington started the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. The college grew strong as an oak, but Booker T. would not seek the shade. Not as long as young minds starve. Too many children, too few schools, and not nearly enough money. The example of non-literal language that my boss highlighted in this sentence is young minds starve. Does this mean that young minds actually starve? No, that would not make sense at all. This language isn't literal. So let me add the phrase, young minds starve, to my graphic organizer. What side of my graphic organizer should I add it to? That's right, I will add it to the left side under non-literal language. You add it to yours too. Okay, now I know I have to determine the meaning of young minds starve. I don't have a good idea about that phrase might mean, so I'm going to look for clues in the context of the text. I see that too many children, too few schools, and not nearly enough money is stated in the text sentence. I can infer that this might mean that there weren't enough schools for all the students who wanted to learn. So, I think that young minds starve means that there are still many students who wanted to learn. I can substitute the dot, there were still many students who wanted to learn, into the sentence to see if it makes sense within the text. Let's try it. But Booker T. would not seek the shade as long as there were still many students who wanted to learn. Does that make sense? I think so too. So let's write there were still many students who wanted to learn in the right-hand column under meaning. All right, text detectives. We've completed 1. How many to go? Yes, only 1 more to go. Now it's your turn. You are going to determine the meaning of the last examples of non-literal language in this text. Are you ready? Okay, let's look at the second example in context clue 2. I'll read it aloud for you. Uncle Bo called Miss Shaw up front. A pretty new teacher from the city. No more 8 grades in one room. Miss Shaw has a sing-song voice. Children, you are diamonds in the rough. I will polish you bright as stars. In this sentence, you will be determining the meaning of the non-literal phrase, polish you bright as stars. Shout out the non-literal phrase. That's right, polish you bright as stars. Now what? Yes, you'll use clues from the text to help you determine the meaning of polish you bright as stars. Look at the text to find the clues and say the meaning of this phrase. Shout it out! Alright, text detectives, what did you write down for the meaning of polish you as bright as stars? Wow, you're really good at this. I heard you say that this means make you smarter. I was thinking the same thing. Since this sentence before this stated that Miss Shaw was a teacher, I inferred that the teacher was going to make the students smarter. Great work, text detectives. Do you know what that means? We've cracked the case of the non-literal phrases. Way to go! Today, we were able to determine the meaning of non-literal phrases by using context clues from the text. High five! This case is closed. But, you know our work doesn't stop here. For an additional challenge, I invite you to look back at some other examples of non-literal words or phrases from this text and see if you can use clues from the text to infer their meaning. Be sure to join me next time for another literacy investigation. See you then.